Hello, welcome to the second episode of Marketing in the Age of AI. So thrilled to have Darren with us again. Darren, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Rich. Great to be back.
Great to have you as well. So in this episode, we're going to be talking about visibility and how it's impossible to grow if you can't see. So we've got some really interesting slides and a few interesting topical points to put in front of Darren and for us to have a discussion over. So I think let's sort of jump straight into it. Let's throw some discussion points onto the slide, and it would be great to get your thoughts on it. So one thing we're seeing, and I think you're probably seeing the same, is that AI is exploding, content creation is exploding, and I think this is sort of showing what's going to be happening over the next couple of years, but actually sort of forward looking for the next, 10 years really. And what it looks like is that we're still at day one or day zero maybe. I'm interested to get your thoughts on how you're seeing this.
Yeah, it's certainly been explosive. I think for creative teams in particular, their ability to use Gen AI now to create content at scale far faster than they ever had before. I mean, in this slide, it talks about it probably doubling over the past couple of years. It's probably even bigger than that, but it's significant in terms of what they can create and the ease of doing it. So, but what's probably scarier is that the ability to create, 5, 10, 15x that in the coming years is going to be there. So it's likely going to create other complications for creative teams as well. As much as they love creating content and doing it faster, it will have some knock-on consequences, I imagine.
100%. It was funny when we found this slide and just sort of put it up as a discussion point. I was looking at the right, thinking where is 2025, and I think you then realize you're sort of all the way at the left. It's that sort of moment of you think, wow, it feels crazy enough. Every enterprise brand is now actively deploying Gen AI or running it, and you look at this and you're like, okay, we think it's getting crazy now. We're just getting started. So
yeah, it used to be for creative directors, they'd be getting pressure to get content out, when the marketing teams are asking for it. Now they can, in theory, get ahead of it. But obviously the expectations on both sides increase. So now that they can produce content at scale like that, now they're expected to do that every day.
100%. And I think the discussion point, and you are way more qualified than I am here, is that is everybody ready? There's this great stat from Gartner, which has come out this year, and we see this a lot. I think you have a much more experience to be able to go into the weeds on it, but we're seeing that every big enterprise brand, probably every brand now in the land, has tried a project in some way through AI. But it looks like a lot of them are struggling to see right now the initial impact. So maybe whether it's been mandated down from the board, from stakeholders, just use ChatGPT. I know everybody's heard that. How do you see this?
I see a few things. We talked about it in the last webinar, but every company has asked their people to start using AI. But I found in talking to CMOs, certainly across the Fortune 500, that many have not deployed any kind of education for those folks in terms of how to use it properly. So everybody is sort of figuring it out themselves, which is obviously fine, but it's pretty time intensive. Not everybody's using it the same way, and not everybody's comfortable with taking on new technology like this. So I think, part of it is really getting everybody educated on the topic. I think that's a big problem.
No, I think so. And I definitely think, this sort of, you've got stakeholder pressure as well. I think, certainly what we see is they've got C-level executives saying, we need to be doing this, we need to be using it. I assume that's from a company point of view. I think operationally, the actual ways of doing that haven't quite filtered down yet. I think being able to create something from nothing requires a lot of the foundational elements to be good and in order. And I guess that's part of what we're going to cover in this session.
Yeah, I definitely think that creating content at scale is great, but does it come at the expense of creativity? Potentially, but also how do we know what's working and what isn't? Which I think we'll talk about a little later. When you're producing that much content, it makes it even harder to track what's performing, what isn't, and why. So I think that it's great that we can produce all that, but how are we tracking what we produce? How are we archiving that information? How do we find what we've produced? I mean, sometimes I forget what I produced, for a last holiday campaign. Now, when I'm producing content 10x that I did the prior year, it's even harder to remember where that stuff is. So figuring out, how do we catalog all this content being created so that we can find it again, I think is going to be interesting.
No, 100%. Which kind of takes us nicely into where we want to take this. So AI is going to cost enterprise a lot of money if they don't get some things right. I think we're seeing that, and I think you're kind of sort of hinting at that as well. We focused on 3 sort of key areas today. I think there are probably 10, but I think the first one is visibility, and the fact that I don't think anybody can really see what's going on. I think a lot of people think they can see everything, that they think they have this under control, and that it's somebody else's problem. But I think from our experience, this is a really big elephant in the room, that for AI, Gen AI, future growth, you've got to be able to see what's happening, and I don't think people can. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that certainly the biggest issue is when you're creating that much content, where is it going? I mean, many organizations have some sort of a digital asset management system that they're using, but as I know firsthand, I think you mentioned it here, at least half is really not either coded correctly, is out of date, it's not stuck in the right place. And so even if you have a digital asset management system that you can search, and many aren't really at that point now where you can search to the level you want to search at, like I want to know what I did that had 4 people in it and an ice cream. I mean, that capability is still early. But the problem is, even if you create 1,000 pieces of content, only maybe 500 might actually be there. So you're sort of flying blind with what you're looking for. So I think you really don't have visibility. You're creating all this content, but if you can't find it again, then what's the point? It's super inefficient for creative teams.
Yeah, I think this is almost like a kind of a part therapy question as well, isn't it? Because I think to admit that you can't see everything is not necessarily an admission of failure. It's kind of an admission of the reality that the last 10 years, probably 15 years, it's just been hellish chaotic. That all of these new tools, new channels, new platforms, new ways to grab audience attention have just come out of nowhere, and I think the chaos and the silos that have ensued are just a result of that. So I don't think there's anyone's at fault here. I think it's just a reality, right?
Yeah, I certainly don't think it's anyone's fault. I think this is the natural evolution of new technology and the new capabilities of doing things that have created new problems to deal with. AI was around, but not really actively used 2 years ago. So as we've started to use it, it creates a whole new set of challenges. And obviously a whole new industry is cropped up for AI tools and services. So those weren't around either, 3 years ago. So I think we will learn as we go what are the problems we're having, and those will also then have new requirements. So I think we'll definitely see that.
Yeah, and I think the idea that AI is going to make this infinitely worse, isn't it? I don't, I think if there's no visibility now, what does that mean for the future?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely a positive person when it comes to AI. I think it's an amazing tool, but I think those who are using it, like us, actively, we need to kind of vocalize where the challenges are and make sure that there's tool services or workarounds that help us, work with it, because the tool is amazing, but if it creates 10 other problems that there's no fixes for, it potentially is creating even more inefficiency than we had before. So we can create lots of content, but if we don't know where it is and we don't know how it's working, we don't know why it's working, then I'm not really quite sure how helpful it really is, other than it seems to be a huge productivity benefit right now. But I wonder if we take a look at the total cost of it, whether it actually is.
Yeah, no, 100%. And there's an interesting stat there as well, isn't there? I think it's one of the IBM stats from their recent report. Fragmented data is the number one barrier to scaling AI and marketing transformation. That would verify, I think, what we're seeing, which is that if you want to be able to do true AI, you need to have everything and all the foundations and everything in one place. I mean, I guess it's sort of an example that we're seeing is that marketing teams are trying to see how can they 10x what it is they're creating. So the idea of right message, right user, right time kind of thing. But I think they're not realizing if they're bringing in 3 or 4 tools to do this, they're essentially just tripling or quadrupling, maybe even 10xing the surface area of problems they're creating, because they already haven't got control of where everything is. And that has sort of compliance issues and another issue, which we're going to come on to. So yeah, I guess I just sort of wonder how you see that, because I think unless organizations can get that foundational piece right, all these new generative AI tools are just they're going to create a hell of a problem pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's a great point, Rich, and I agree. I think that with fragmented data, it makes it already complicated enough to take a look at what's performing and what isn't. Now add in tremendous potential with the scaling of content, and even simple things like, why did this piece of content not perform? Oh, well, we didn't have any inventory. Well, where does that data lie? That data doesn't lie typically with the marketing teams. It lies somewhere in supply chain. So how do we hook up those systems so that when we take a look at a piece of creative and a campaign that's executed, how do we start to pinpoint why it worked, why it didn't, and is it due to the creative? Is it due to other factors? So bringing that all together, if we have the data and we can connect it up, we could get a 360 view of why things are working, even down to what elements of the creative made it work, which I think is probably the most exciting for teams, because up until now, I think most of the analysis has not been around the creative itself, but around that the content we put out worked or didn't. But why it worked or didn't, I think, is one of the biggest questions I tend to have within my marketing team.
Yeah, and I definitely, we're going to come on to that. So I'd love to get your views on that. I think before we do that, I think Tom Fishwell needs a special mention here. How do you see this? You've worked in big companies, small companies, juggernaut companies. Is this getting better? Is it getting worse? Like, how do you see the idea of everyone just locking themselves into their silos and refusing to play ball with each other?
Yeah, I mean, I think historically, you definitely would see silos created within departments, as in finance, marketing, sales, and all of those departments would naturally create silos, not because they're being difficult, although I guess some were, but generally people aren't trying to be difficult. They're just trying to get their jobs done. Now that's probably less the case. I think many of the companies I'm seeing have tried to break those things down and have more active dialogue, although clearly, each department has a different way of thinking about the world. And even though they're all probably charging towards the same results, how they do it is different. But probably the bigger question is within the department. So within, let's say, the marketing organization, there also silos can be created between, email or CRM and brand and social, et cetera. So, and creative, all those are sub departments within marketing that silos can easily come about and be created where no one's talking. So I think that if we don't break those things down and get all those departments working together, I think it's going to be pretty scary. For example, if one of the biggest things I hear from my creative teams are they want to know how their content has worked. They spend all this time creating content. Some they put more effort than others, but they really do want to know if they're going to create the next brief, what tends to work, what doesn't. Try to get some knowledge. Otherwise, they're just creating artistry, which is fine, but they do actually want to be helpful to the organization. So if they don't have that feedback loop, and it's hard enough in a big company, it's harder if now you're producing 10x the content you did before. When is there time to have that sit down to actually triangulate that with that team?
Yeah, I think it's two really interesting things I want to double down on there, and I think it's kind of point 2 of 3 that we wanted to discuss, which is a huge amount right now as of today across enterprise brands. What is being made isn't being used, and I think this horrifies a lot of people. I think there's some very arbitrary basic metrics in this space, and I think as a result, it's kind of been this kind of spray and pray, like you said. There's no link between the sort of the creative process and what's actually happening. I mean, I guess you call it the feedback loop. I mean, the feedback loop even. Sorry, run us through how you see the idea of what's being made isn't being used and the broken feedback loop.
Yeah, I think some of it is down to human nature. I mean, when we're producing, it used to be in some of the big companies I've worked for, we would do 4 campaigns a year. It was pretty easy to know what you created, what the campaign was for, and have a sit down and a postmortem. Nowadays, we're producing content at daily scale. There are, of course, big campaigns, but generally there is so much content being produced that feedback loop is becoming harder and harder to do. And in many cases, I see that feedback loop never happens. For all the love in the world to want to make it happen, there's just no time to do it. And even if they do, it comes down to, well, this campaign did well. we don't know why, but it did well, or maybe we spent more money on Google versus Meta or whatever it is. But why that particular asset worked better than another, really, I don't think it's being talked about. And I think that's really what I've been trying to get at on and on, especially with creative, is what about the piece of content do we think worked or didn't work? And is there any data behind that to back it up?
Yeah. I think this is one of the key areas, going back to, I guess, the theme of the talk, is that visibility, the lack of it is just enabling all these inefficiencies to happen. So a lot of what's being, made isn't used. I mean, anybody watching this now, they, even from your experience where you used to do 4 campaigns, you're now doing always on campaigns, and every little micro campaign has, I don't know, 100, 1,000 assets. I think there's this case of almost spray and pray, that are people actually really looking at what's being used and what's working? I know that a lot of, from my experience, you're being asked to create 1x1s and GIFs, TIFFs, 9x6, all these different variations and formats. I don't think, well, clearly from the stats, most of them never make it into the media buying platform. They just kind of get lost somewhere in that process.
Yeah, I think you'll make requests for things. I mean, again, when you're producing 10, 20 campaigns at a go, priority shift, things become more important. We forget we made it, it's available, but it becomes not a priority. Sometimes things were like, oh, well, we're decided not to run that campaign. Fine, but you would think, okay, we can use that potentially later. It doesn't work now because we have too much content out there, so we're going to save it for later. But the question is, where does that get tagged to bring it out of the depths of the content library that we have? It just sort of gets filed, if it does, and people forget about it. And then that's how that stuff happens. Like, oh yeah, we created that, I totally forgot about that. There's just no systems yet that seem to bring that all together or allow them to do that. I'm sure they're being worked on, but it's becoming overwhelming, the amount of content that's being produced. And if you don't use it, and sometimes you forget it exists, but other times you're like, you deprioritize it because something else comes up. So I think that's where those things come up.
Yeah. I mean, even just talking to this, just across your experience, I mean, I'm sure everybody at every big enterprise brand, even small brand, has seen a version of this. This is the heavily simplified version. I mean, how can this be fixed? How can this? So we haven't even thrown AI in here, which kind of just makes this thing move at 100 or 1,000 times the speed. What How do you see it? Is it still an issue? What steps could people take to try and, I don't know, make this work?
Yeah, I definitely think it's still an issue. And the reason is because everybody's so busy now. The creative teams were busy enough before. Now they're super busy creating content. Everybody is now dealing with many more things in their day because of that. So that feedback loop was already frustrated back to the creative team itself. And my thinking is, if you really want to improve your business, you need to ultimately go back to the creative team who's producing those assets. And if it's not working, they need to know that, because otherwise they will continue to create the same content, concepts, because they assume it's working if you're asking for it again. If they're never told what's working and what's not, so they can go in and try to change course, they won't know. So I think there's got to be tools that come into place that take some of the human factor out of those debriefs, so that effectively creative teams can sort of self-serve. If they've got all the data piped into one centralized location, including the creative and probably AI, because there's so many data points, to try to distill what could be 20 different data zones into an answer, which is this worked because of this, and triangulate it. I think that's really what the creative team needs. And it's great if the marketers understand that, but even if they didn't, as long as the creative teams are actually executing on the brief, understand what works and doesn't work, at least they can kind of take control and help the teams out without having a marketer have to totally understand it and then put that in the brief. So I think that I think is probably where AI will have one of the biggest benefits, is helping distill, an octopus of information.
Yeah. Do you think this is getting any better? I feel like you've got the agency, sort of complication there as well, where you've got this sort of the creative teams, whether it's in-house or in-house or in the agency, and then you've got the media buying, which is generally done externally from the brand. Do you see this? Do you see any sort of resolve to this problem? can it be fixed? I see some creative teams who they get spreadsheets. When the creative team asks how did everything perform, and some of them, the only time they know they've done a good job is if they win a Cannes Lion or some kind of award. But they, or they get this trivial spreadsheet back that just has a few, metric numbers on a media plan with views next to it and no context at all. I guarantee you've seen that somewhere, haven't you?
Yeah, I think certainly when you have external agencies, which many of those watching this probably do, that's a whole nother complication, because those folks are not always piped into the data systems we have. In fact, many times they're not. So they also want to know, how did it work? Did it work well? What did we think of it? So if they don't have those systems, they need, again, another way to self-serve, because they obviously want to be the agency of record with that company. And so they want to do good work. And if it all comes down to pure creativity, but no results, that's fantastic. And maybe they'll win awards for that. But they also need to serve the business needs. And if the business isn't growing, but just winning awards, they probably won't be the agency for very long. So again, there's that loop. So it's already problematic internally, but then you add the external element. So I do think it can be fixed, but it is going to require all of the data points to be able to be connected, and then a kind of master system to be able to distill all that, and then provide, I would say, a faster view in terms of what do we think all these data points are telling us, and what can we learn from that? And I think that would be the huge win in the industry, and allow the teams to sort of self-serve that without having to everybody stop what they do and have a meeting about it. It's fine if you have 4 campaigns a year. It is not fine if you have 400. So I think they're going to have data at their fingertips. And also the agencies can read that and then provide that back to the company saying, here's what we've learned from this. This worked, this didn't work. Here's what we're going to change going forward. I think that would make an agency even more valuable to the company, because they can self-serve and not wait for the company to tell them whether or not they liked it or not.
Yeah, and I think that kind of segues into into the sort of, I guess, where we wanted to go next, which is kind of understanding why. That it's the why. Why does something work? Why doesn't it work? Do you think anybody in creative teams, whether it's in-house, externally, do you think the why is ever really asked? Do you think can they even ask that question? Why is stuff working? Why is it not?
Can they ask it? Yes. Do they ask it? Absolutely. I don't think they have the answer to it. I think people tend to ask, what worked and what didn't. There is the conversation of usually, why do we think it was successful? If it wasn't successful, we'll probably ask why we think that. And sometimes we will come up with things like, well, we had inventory shortages, or there was some obvious barrier. But I rarely see it getting into the creative itself and saying, because we had this celebrity, or because our theme was so unique, or the key points about our brand or product were so differentiated, or it was in real time. We reacted within 24 hours to a major cultural event, and that's why it worked. I think sometimes people can do that, and it will be assumed that because we were so quick to react to a major cultural zeitgeist moment, that's why it worked. And it may have been, but it would be great to have a little bit more data behind that, as opposed to just assuming that to be the case. For all we know, we could have been the only one in our category advertising that week, and everybody took a pause, and therefore we did better than everybody else because we were the primary spender in the category. So there's lots of reasons why we can be winning. And so I think all those data points coming together, including some analysis of the creative in context to competitively what's happening, can also probably tell us a little bit about why did it work or didn't work, with some sort of authority.
Yeah. If you think performance has become a race to the bottom, to the lowest common denominator of cost per click, cost per view, do you think creative is likely to have a renaissance, or do you think it is having a renaissance now, that actually people are realizing that could be the main sort of primary driver moving forward?
I definitely think that it is having a renaissance and being important. My only concern is with the advent of AI tools and helping creative produce more content. They're being asked to produce so much content that do they have the time to think about what creative they want to produce? I mean, creatives are by nature creative people, and they do need some headspace to think about the creative angle they want to take. And of course, AI tools can potentially help them get their thinking coalesced faster, but the creative process does take some level of time. So if they're being asked to create, 20 pieces of content per day, across every day that they work, my guess is their ability to be, creative for the next time is going to be impeded by that. At some point, they may run out of ideas and creative solutions to things. So, and also, if they don't have any kind of a way to query the system of what they've created, when you're creating that much content, it is easy to forget as a human what you've done before. Have I created this Valentine's Day campaign before with this theme? Has anybody done it in our organization? Especially if you have multiple creative organizations and external agencies doing content. To create a system by which can actually tell them that would also be helpful, because the ability to create duplication definitely is there. I don't remember what I did 6 months ago. I think I've got the new creative idea that I've never thought of before. In reality, I produced it 6 months ago. I've seen that happen more than I care to admit. And that's scary as well. There's just no system to look at to tell me that I did that before.
Yeah, a sort of a way to go in and say, what was our most successful Q1 campaign, or what was our most successful, I think you said Valentine's Day campaign, and how could we do more of it? What is resonating with our customers? Yeah,
absolutely. You can definitely get into the weeds on the data, like in terms of who we featured in the ads. Do we find, younger demographics are working better for us, or older ones, or, different ethnicities? All of that, we may find interesting insight in terms of the fact that, when we have two people on a park bench in Paris, that definitely seems to resonate with our audience versus just having a product shot. We don't know until we create all that and put it into the system and distill it, but I would bet we will learn some things we never thought to ask before about the things that work for us in a given organization. So I think that's pretty exciting about the things that we haven't thought to ask, that now AI tools will be able to tell us. Have we considered that this is the reason why it's working? So I think the aha moments in the organizations are going to be really exciting to see.
And so to do that, so if we work backwards, so this is the holy grail of this is nirvana, basically, being able to ask why. How do we do that? I guess going back to the earlier point, it's getting the foundations right and getting everything in one place.
100%. I think that the first is knowing all the disparate levels of data that need to come together in terms of in a perfect world, to analyze how we're doing, whether it's supply chain information, retail information, what's going on competitively, like all those data points, Google Analytics, all the things that we have. If we were to put that master list together in an organization, say in a perfect world, all this data would be available to us. Whether it's relevant or not, we don't know, but it's all being able to be accessed. Then we need a tool to be able to access all that information through probably some sort of an API, and then to distill it down. So I don't think the companies necessarily need to worry about how do we make that, how do we solve the problem? We just need actually the data to be able to be gotten. Once we have that, I think the right solution will arise that can take all that data, distill it, and provide it in a proper form. So I think the first step is getting all that data together so that it can be piped in. And I wouldn't suggest companies try to aim for perfection. If they can get 80% of those tools to be connected into one place better than it is today, then that is a win. And I wouldn't say they need to wait for some transformative change within their organization to get 100% of all the data they need. I wouldn't optimize for perfection here. I'd optimize for actually getting to a better result.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question to sort of pose. So don't burn the house down. Don't try and get to total perfection here. Just try and do the best you can. Join the dots. Get a much bigger picture and go from there. Your experience with enterprise and navigating that is much greater than mine. So that's a really interesting insight.
I see all too often the idea is, let's sit down and transform how we do what we do. Let's lay out all the things we need, which is great and good to do. But oftentimes we find that there are giant barriers in getting certain things done. And instead of saying, well, we need to solve those things before we take any steps forward, my argument, at least from history, has been sometimes those barriers take a long time to fix. And they may be systemic, they may be lack of tools, lots of reasons why that, so if it's going to take us another year or two to solve that, I would say don't worry about it. Yes, put that into the queue. But let's get everything else ready and moving, because I would argue having that in place is going to lead to a significant step change in what you can do today versus waiting for all the systems to be ready to go. It isn't going to, the net benefit is not going to be there, I don't think, to wait for it. And I don't know any organization's CEO or CFO that's okay with letting a year or two go by before you can actually get at the answers they want. So I would err for, let's go for what we have. Let's get to better solutions, and let's just call it out that the information is going to be imperfect, but it's going to be significantly better than we had before.
Yeah, I think that time thing's really interesting. I mean, can you believe that, just over a year ago, ChatGPT was a thing, but it wasn't a thing. People were sort of aware of it, they were testing it, and now you fast forward and it's almost like it's almost the right hand for nearly everybody. And that's 12 months. I mean, the Industrial Revolution took what, 50 years to materialize. It's moving super fast.
It's certainly, I agree with you. The pace of change around AI and the focus on it, and sort of the expectation that everybody's AI literate is super off the charts. I just continue to say, I mean, I think certainly marketers and I'm sure creatives are certainly trying to educate themselves on it. I think any marketing leader, if they've not asked the question of their team, how literate are they in AI, and making sure that at least there's a baseline of usage of the tools and making sure they understand how to get the best of that for each department, I think is going to be important. I don't think we should assume that everyone is using it the way we think we are. There's always going to be some leaders that are super users of this technology, and they may assume incorrectly that the rest of their teams are doing that as well. And some people are embarrassed about that. This is a new thing, and not everybody's used to using new tools or to figure out how do I get the best out of it. So certainly getting your teams to share knowledge and help each other along. There's no shame in not totally understanding how to use this. It's not like this is being rolled out by a major corporation with a handbook. Everybody's learning at their own pace. So I do think it's exciting.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing it. And I guess a final recap just for everybody, and I guess in the theme of, if you can't see everything, it gets hard to future-proof and grow. So, if you could boil it down to 3 steps people could take away from this and go and discuss internally, what would they be for you?
I would definitely say that, first, figure out all the data that needs to be connected and at least identify it. And make sure that you know where it is, and figure out what can be connected and what can't be, and where those barriers exist. I think they should also open those discussions to figure out how we can open up those. If they can't solve it, it's okay, but at least identifying all the things they need, there will be tools and systems that will come along that will help make that easier for them. But at least we know here are the 20 things we need to connect. I think secondly is making sure their teams are as literate as possible in the technology. There's tons of services out there, and it's created a whole cottage industry, and that can be overwhelming for teams as well. There's tons of tools for every discipline within marketing as well as other functions. So it can be easy to get lost in the let's continue to explore tools until the end of time. I think that you will find things that are significant improvements, and just to get moving, I think is half the battle.
Yeah. Super interesting. We spoke to a fascinating guy at a very big company, will not be named, and I think he said he was getting over 500 emails a week for different AI related tools, which kind of shows you the complexity and that people are facing. But
and I think just to wrap that out, the third thing I would say is don't try to be perfect with it. I would say just move. The tools and systems will be significantly better for you if you actually start to engage and actually try to get at the root cause of what's working and what isn't. And don't try to wait around for some transformative moment within the organization. Even if the organization is saying we should have a transformation with AI, or we should do a marketing transformation, or whatever those things are, those can easily take a huge amount of time. So I wouldn't wait around for those things to complete. I would try to, in parallel, move your department in a significant step change, because anything you do here likely won't negatively impact whatever transformation occurs.
Yeah, completely agree with that. So Darren, thank you very much for that. I hope everybody else found that really useful as well. It's always a pleasure to talk. This was episode 2 of 6. We have other ones coming, which sort of get more interesting and in depth and controversial with time. So super excited to do those with you.
Thanks for having me.
Not at all. If anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to Darren or myself on LinkedIn. And Darren, thank you. Good to see you as always.
You too.
We'll catch up soon. Bye.
Bye.